How are you feeling about the Chris Jones holdout? Chiefs training camp is more than 3 weeks old and still no Jones. I kind of doubt we'll see him in St. Joseph. But when will we see him in a Chiefs uniform? Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach is optimistic. He said as much to star columnists Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian and reporters Jesse Newell and me. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. This is SportsBeat KC, the Star Sports podcast, and it's Tuesday, August 8th. You'll hear what Veach had to say about Jones on today's show. After a break, we switch teams and talk Royals with beat writer Jaylon Thompson. The Royals' recent 7-game winning streak, the play of shortstop Bobby Witt Jr., and the team's decisions at the trade deadline are our topics. Let's get started with a conversation with Sam McDowell and Jesse Newell, which leads into comments by Brett Veach. We know Chris Jones, the holdout continues, and now we know he wants a big contract because we heard Brett Veach tell us that today. What else did we learn from the Stars' conversation with Brett Veach? Sam McDowell and Jesse Newell are going to tell us. Jesse, what was your big takeaway from a conversation with Brett Veach today?
Yeah, I'll probably steal from Sam's thunder here, but I think one of the most interesting things came from one of his questions, which was talking about last year they traded Tyreek Hill in the offseason, and what they learned from that, or if they took something from that. And Brett Veach directly connected trading Tyreek Hill and gaining salary cap room and younger players to the idea that they wanted to sign Chris Jones long-term this offseason. He directly said one thing was done with the intention of the next thing getting done. So to put a big bow on it, obviously the Chiefs still remain in contact with Chris Jones' agents. They still want to get a long-term deal done. Brett Veach spoke about that many times. I think the other thing, I went and asked him about a potential trade at this point in the year. And I know, Sam, we've talked about this before, where this makes it really tricky because any draft picks you would get, what the trade would be for next year, not this year. And the Chiefs are trying to go back-to-back. But he almost cut me off and said no, that was not on the table, not in the cards, not something that they would consider at this point. Again, things can always change, but I would say those were the two main things. But directly relating Tyreek Hill to the Chris Jones situation was very interesting. I think it lets you know, at least from what he told us, what the Chiefs think about Chris Jones.
Yeah, look, that's for me too. I mean, having the Chris Jones contract in mind back in March of 2022 was pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so too. But also, if we trace back to our own experiences in 2022, like the Brett Veach we met with today is one who's tied up by another player's decision, and I thought seemed genuinely in the dark about where Chris Jones, when he's going to be here in St. Joe. I think we all think it'd be a surprise if he was ever here for a practice in St. Joe. And so now you're eyeing like that August 16th, 17th range when they get back to Kansas City. But, I mean, I didn't think Brett Veach had a great beat on when Chris Jones is going to be part of the Chiefs roster this year. And you trace back to last year and you talk about that Tyreek Hill, and it's all excitement about these new guys that they have. And now I think it's probably, listen, we heard Andy Reid today at the podium as well. I mean, it's unnerving for these guys not to be in control of this situation right now.
You asked an interesting question just a few minutes ago before we started recording, Sam. Would you trade Chris Jones for Tyreek Hill? Who's got the greater value? And I think we both came up on the same side of this.
Yeah,
We'd rather have...
Yeah, Chris Jones.
Yep. Well, let me ask you guys this real quick, and you can get to it, Sam, but specifically for the Chiefs, you would take Chris Jones. I think on another team, you could make an argument for Tyreek Hill, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think you could. To me, I think Chris Jones is the more valuable player because the way he changes players around him. Chris Jones was the most double-teamed player in the NFL last year and still had the best pass rush win rate of any team in the NFL, any player in the NFL last year. So doubled most often, still wins the most often. And that's the only player I think and I know there's a lot of infatuation with Nick Bolton, very good player. Chris Jones is the game record that you have on that side of the ball. You have other options on offense, including the head coach himself. And I just don't think you have that equivalent on defense, which is why, look, I've always thought that if you're going to stretch your budget for one guy that's not Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be a guy like Chris Jones that can just change a game with one play. And look, I'm not saying Tyreek Hill couldn't do that, but it's just different. It's a different beast when you can do it on your own. You don't need the ball thrown to you.
I think it's context dependent, though. Again, for the Chiefs, Chris Jones makes a lot of sense because the defensive side of the ball doesn't have Andy Reid. It doesn't have Travis Kelce. It doesn't have Patrick Mahomes just doing what he did last year, which was taking more on top of himself to make this array of other weapons better than probably what they should be. So for the Chiefs, it makes the most sense. Again, for Miami, I think you could argue pretty easily that they were pretty happy with the trade, and they get him, Tyreek Hill with Waddle, and they make their quarterback really good. And we see receivers historically go for all these high salaries that they get paid now, and they're top of the market. And guys like Chris Jones don't typically get paid. We see Aaron Donald at $31 million. Everybody else is around 24. So you can make arguments both ways, but specifically for the Chiefs, I just think, if you have to give a little more to Andy Reid to do, or Patrick Mahomes to do, or Travis Kelce to do, that's okay. But on the defensive side of the ball, you made the point, Sam. It makes it very much more difficult that they don't have that anchor on that side, and that's why Chris Jones helps them so much.
He's what makes us tick, I believe, or words to that effect.
Yeah, that's what Brett said, yeah.
Another fascinating quote that he talked about today. And very effusive in his praise for Chris Jones, continuing to be that way even as he holds out from camp.
Yeah, they've got talent on defense, but they do spend more money in the NFL in their offense than like four teams in the NFL. Like, Chris Jones is their moneymaker on defense. As much as, again, you talk about Nick Bolton, L'Jarius Sneed, very good players. Like, Chris Jones is what makes the whole defensive line work. And now, we're asking Andy Reid again today about Charles Omenihu's suspension. And you really wonder what this defensive line would look like without him, which players a question that you asked Brett Veach today.
So did the conversation with Brett Veach change the way you think about the resolution of the Chris Jones contract negotiation?
Not me personally. I've ever since that draft passed and free agency passed, I have viewed this as the Chiefs being in a really bad spot. Because if you're going to act on something significant with Chris Jones, like a trade, it was going to have to come before the draft, and you still had a chance to rebuild your roster. That has come and passed, and I think we met with the general manager who recognizes that this is not an ideal spot for him to be in, that the player has more leverage than the Chiefs would like any player, not just Chris Jones, but any player to get to eventually, especially once training camp is already here.
What do you think?
Yeah,
more or less.
Yeah, I'm with Sam. A lot of the discussion was sort of expected, and it does seem – I know Sam has had this discussion when we've talked before, and we've talked so much about the Chiefs being so good at always being flexible. And Brett Veach has talked before about always looking at options. And a lot of GMs wouldn't have thought about trading Tyreek Hill when they did. Look back to Orlando Brown. They didn't offer him the franchise tag. We all thought they were going to. But they remained flexible, and they got Jawan Taylor, and they got the guys they wanted in here. And this just seems like a different situation. They're so good at not painting themselves in a corner. And as Sam has talked about before here, this is a situation where Chris Jones holds the cards a little bit, and that's not a situation the Chiefs have been in very often.
It comes down to like this, what is Chris Jones' best move at this time? To come to training camp every day in St. Joe and sweat it out? Or, he's been in the system for 4 years. I think the benefit on that hits a ceiling at some point. While Andy Reid said today the game goes fast, but I think, the only leverage he has is not showing up here every day and creating this sort of uneasiness that, like I said, I think you could sense from the GM today, and you heard Andy Reid say in front of cameras today, he's frustrated with this situation. I don't know when he's going to be here.
First to say, Andy hates these questions. He hates having to deal with this. He hates the distraction.
He hates the situation.
He hates the situation. This really, and this is the most uncomfortable he is when talking about football things in front of a microphone, is getting asked these questions and not knowing what to say because it's very obvious he wants him here.
Yeah, because there's no good answer. There's no good answer that the Chiefs.
It's a tough situation.
Right now.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of experience with these questions either because the Chiefs haven't had many of these situations. I can remember though one of the years Eric Berry held out, and Andy was asked often about it and just hated it. So we talk a lot about how we interpreted what Brett Veach said. Let's actually listen to what Brett Veach said. We're going to play about 8 to 10 minutes of the conversation that the Star reporters had with Brett Veach. Here we go.
I wish I had a good update to give you. We've had communications, and those communications are still ongoing. And on one end, I think everybody would like him back, but on the other end, we don't kick off until September 7th, so we'll continue with those conversations and their ultimate goal is to have Chris here and to get him locked away a long-term deal. And I think from an organizational standpoint, that's nothing has changed in that regard. And so it's one of those situations where every team and every sport deals with, and the more you win, the more you deal with these things. So again, we'll just continue to press on and keep those communication lines open, and hopefully get him back here soon.
Has his asking price changed since March till now?
I mean, he's a great player, and he wants a big contract, and so now he deserves a big contract, and I don't think there's any surprise in that regard. But there's just some hurdles we have to work through in regards to how we can keep this thing going for the short and long term. And but I don't think we've never wavered on, this is a guy that, we want to exhaust all of our efforts to get done, because that's how much we think of him. So we'll continue to do that, because that's the ultimate goal here. And sometimes these things take some time, and so we'll just continue to press away and work through that, and hopefully make some movement here. But again, we went into this, and as we're having these ongoing dialogues, our intent and desire has always been to get Chris Jones secure for the foreseeable future, and we're going to press on with that mindset.
How would a Chiefs team this season look without and be without Chris Jones?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be as good as one with, and I think we certainly acknowledge that. I mean, he's the guy that makes everything tick, and so I think that's apparent to us, and that's why going into the off season and even to where we are now, that's why our mindset is to continue to work hard to get something done with him, because that's how we feel about him.
Andy talked a little bit about the communication, the very start of training camp, and it lessened. I mean, just how would you classify the communication? You said there's been some, but how would you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not as productive as you'd like, or there'd be a deal done. But at the same time, I mean, like I said, they're not. They start off, and in the springtime it's more of a holding pattern, because you're waiting for stuff, so it's a little bit more hypothetical in nature. And then when you get close to camp, you're having them, and you're having them every day, and the dialogue is extensive, and then you reach this point where I think both parties want to just kind of take a deep breath and reset a little bit, and then they become less frequent. But at the same time, I mean, start of the season September 7th, so by nature they're going to have to heat up again, and like I said, that's why we're still optimistic. And although again, a large chunk of the time here has passed, there's we still have time, and Chris has been in this system for a long time, and he does a great job of staying in shape. And so we have no doubt that if and when we're able to get something done, he'll hit the ground running and be in good shape.
How much did you learn, and maybe you didn't need the lesson, but just from the way last year worked out, and the off season of last year was really prioritizing the long term, and what I think outside people viewed at the expense of the short term, it didn't turn out to be that way, but it was definitely prioritizing one over the other, right?
Yeah.
Did that sort of set the framework for how you want to do future off seasons too, and think of situations like this?
Well, I think it just reinforced the mindset that you keep all your options open, and like I said, where we were going, you have to keep in mind that when we did make that move with Tyreek, one of the determining factors was because there was a expected Chris Jones deal, and so to do Tyreek, there was a concern of would we be able to do Chris, and so that was a moment of time, and it was before the draft that we hit the reset button, and we're like, it's really hard to give up or to trade a player the match of Tyreek Hill, but we're following that up with someone just as significant and on the defensive side. And so now's an opportunity to utilize these draft resources and get younger on both sides, knowing that we're going to have some tall tasks next year, one being Chris Jones. So, it wasn't like, every time you have a great player like Tyreek, you want to trade him and recoup, draft assets. I think that is important, and I think, there are times when you need to do it, but again, a lot of that reasoning was because, we expected to get something done with Chris, and that's why we're, steadfast in our resolve to get something done.
We'll probably move on after this, but the timeline was different with March, obviously, with Tyreek, and you talked about keeping all options open. Is a trade still? Is it something that's on the table?
No, I would.
Okay.
I would say that a trade is not on the table.
Okay.
We'd like to get something done, and obviously he's under contract this year. But I think for all parties, I think the best resolution, would be for him to, end his career as a Chief and get that financial security, and for us to, do what we had set out to do, and that's, to work through last offseason with this offseason in mind, and get some young guys, which we did that, and then focus on this year and getting Chris done. So, we hopefully we get this resolved, but we have no intentions of making a trade.
Okay, let's catch up with Royals beat writer Jaylon Thompson. Jaylon, it's great to have you back on the show. I got to tell you, the Royals, until just a little while ago, I don't believe had a winning record in a week this season, and then they have a week where they don't lose a game. So for a guy who's covered the team just about all season, it must have been fun to watch the Royals put together this 7-game winning streak. Came to an end in Philadelphia with a couple losses as the Royals prepared to play the Boston Red Sox, but they played their best baseball of the season this past week. Had to be just a better mood in the clubhouse because of it.
Yeah, it definitely has. When you look at the clubhouse, a lot of the guys were upbeat, they were excited, and they've always been that way throughout the season, but it goes to another level when you start winning games. And I talked to several players, especially like Matt Beatty. He was there for like 4 of the games because he came back from the injury list, but he said that the team was just playing the right way, doing the small things, and those start to add up. And then I believe that a lot of the younger players have seen that as long as we do what we're called to do, what the team needs from us in that certain moment or crucial situations, we can come out and we can get a victory. So I think that's been the theme that they've all learned throughout that 7-game winning streak.
Yeah, they were doing so many things right? They were, hitting with runners in scoring position, pitchers throwing strikes, getting ahead. So many good things throughout that the Twins and the Mets series, and then the first game against the Phillies. Great to see that happening. And even in the 2 games they lost afterwards, they took the lead in both games against Philadelphia. So some good signs for the Royals as they finish out the season. A couple of players we need to spotlight, starting with Bobby Witt Jr. What a tear he was on. Let's just go through the highlights with him. The biggest, starting with the walk-off grand slam he had in the game against Minnesota, and then in was it the first game in Philly where he got the home run and the stolen base that pushed him to 20 and 30 for the year, the first player in Major League Baseball history to hit 20 home runs and steal 30 bases in his first 2 years. Amazing for Bobby Witt Jr. You covered him all year though, Jaylon. We know he's got this great combination of speed and power, but I think we're seeing it on full display this past week.
Yeah, we definitely have. And it's funny that you read off his accolades and his highlights and how he became the first player in MLB history, like you said, to have 20 home runs and 30-plus steals in his first 2 seasons. We asked him a couple of months ago, what were some of the adjustments that you made at the plate to really hit the fastballs and send them over the fence? And, he says he just keeps putting in work day in and day out, and I know he might not want to give away all the secrets to his success, but it's great to see him really just thrive and come through in this moment for this Royals team, because quite frankly, they needed a star to emerge. They needed someone that can stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder with a Salvador Perez, with a Zach Greinke. And Bobby Witt Jr. can take that mantle once those guys continue to play and their playing careers will ultimately be retiring soon. So looking at what he's doing from that potential, you look at his numbers, I believe he hit had a 1.031 slugging percentage during the 7-game winning streak. So it's very impressive to see how they call him Bobby Baseball doing what he's doing on the field.
Yeah, for sure. Look, he one thing I noticed about his at-bats during this streak and his hot streak is his pitch selection much better than it had been. You don't see him striking out, chasing balls out of the zone, just good approaches with his plate appearances. That's great to see. I hope to see that continue. Hey, real quick, why was it just a day off for him on Sunday? I was just wondering why he wasn't in the lineup for the final game of that.
Yeah, I believe so. It was just a day off for him. He played throughout that whole entire streak, so yeah. I think it's giving him a time to rest his legs, I believe. Okay,
a couple other players we should single out. How about Freddie Fermin has really established himself. He's playing so well right now, and maybe changes the way I think about the Salvador Perez's position. As the Royals' everyday catcher. Freddie Fermin is he's hitting his way into some everydayness, isn't he? What have been your observations about Fermin?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Blair. Freddie Fermin, I have been championing for him to get more playing time all season. I just like the way he swings the bat. I like the way how he competes. And if you look at yesterday's game, they had Salvi catch, and they put Fermin at designated hitter. So that's been part of the reason why they lost the DH when Salvi got hurt and left the game. So I believe that Freddie Fermin is really just hitting his stride. He's 28 years old. It's an ultimate baseball feel-good story. He started out as an international free agent in 2015. He was in rookie ball. He climbed his way through every level of the minor league system. He knows all the young pitchers. He's worked with the ball. And now he's getting this opportunity this season, and he's thriving. I mean, some of those home runs that he hit in this series against the Phillies, I believe that was Saturday, hit 2 of them, was really impressive. So, I mean, he just keeps putting bat to ball, and he says he's sticking with his plan, and that plan seems to be working.
Dude can rake, that's for sure. I'm really impressed with him, and also happy to see Brady Singer finally. It's just the on-again, off-again Brady Singer's had back-to-back good starts and looked really good against the Mets. So maybe some hope for upside with Brady Singer. Of course, everybody we're talking about, Fermin and Witt and Singer and really everybody on the team, maybe except for the exception of Salvador Perez, was rumored at the trade deadline, right, to be dealt, and as it turned out, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the most significant names that left the Royals at this time are, of course, Nicky Lopez, and that happened long before the deadline. Scott Barlow and Ryan Yarbrough were all dealt away. And
Jose Cuas too.
And you're right, Jose Cuas, the reliever, who was I liked. I thought it was a place for him in the bullpen. So I think the Royals took some criticism for the Nicky Lopez trade. I think they got good marks for the other ones. What's your general feeling about how the Royals did? They were active, but how they did there at the trade deadline.
I felt like they did just enough to get some prospects back and fill some needs in the farm system. But I feel like there's a lot of meat that was left on that bone, especially about the deals that they didn't do with Salvador Perez, possibly maybe someone like if they want to ship Zach Greinke away, or maybe someone from their core group as well. General Manager Jesse Newell said that they had some deals that they were looking at trying to get done, and it just fell through as the deadline progressed. So I believe that the Royals, they know what they want, and they in this 7-game winning streak that they're on, that they were on, they saw that, hey, we got a chance that we can really turn this around with the guys that we have. We just got to keep adding pieces to that. So it might be tough for them to get rid of some of the big marketable guys, but if that leads you to get back to playoff contention, back to relevancy, I think you do it. And as far as the players that they got back in this trade, for Scott Barlow, Nicky Lopez, Jose Cuas, and Ryan Yarbrough, I like Henry Williams. He was a number 10 prospect for the San Diego Padres, came in the Barlow deal. He had Tommy John surgery, but he's working his way back, and he has a good commanded his pitches, a strikeout thrower. Now, I like Nelson Velasquez. He can hit for home runs. I think he had 16 home runs in his MLB career. Short stint with the Chicago Cubs, but that's what they got back for Jose Cuas. So I like both of those guys.
Okay. One of the things that I don't know if it surprised me, but maybe just informed me during the rumors and the speculation leading up to the trade deadline was I think Royals fans have come to accept the idea that Salvador Perez could have been traded. And of course, there was that talk about him and the Marlins, maybe trying to work out a deal with the Marlins. Any idea how close the Royals came to pulling off a deal that would have sent Salvi to Miami?
Well, I do know they had conversations with Salvi throughout the whole day of the trade deadline, and I think there was some reports that were out there that the Marlins were looking to get a deal done at the deadline with the Royals, but I think just when it came down to the end, the Royals realized that the return wasn't going to be enough for them to part with Salvi, so they held on to him. And because you got to realize, he's making $20 million this year, will make $20 million next year, $22.5 in 2025, and he'll have a $13.5 million contract with a $2 million buyout in 26. So that's a lot of money that some team will have to eat for Salvador Perez. And from my estimation, the Royals were not going to eat that money just to give him away to somebody else. So they really needed a good prospect or a package in return to move their caps. So I think it's just better for them to keep Salvi and help the young pitching staff the rest of this season and into next year as well.
Very good. All right, Jaylon Thompson covers the Royals for the Kansas City Star. Jaylon, thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. Glad to speak with you, and I hope you're enjoying the Chiefs out there. We miss you on the weekly podcast.
Yeah, I miss that too. Take care, my friend.
All right, same to you. Thank you.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to producer Randy Mason for putting together the show, and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Monty Davis, Todd Feedback, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian, Sam McDowell, Jesse Newell, and Jaylon Thompson for sharing their insights. Here's my weekly pitch for the Morning Sports Edition, the best digital sports page in the U.S. Today's edition was loaded with Chiefs, Royals, college sports, World Cup soccer, auto racing, and more. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in and around Kansas City.